Welcome to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're telling the stories of Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. KC Cares is proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis, and behind the scenes is Bobby Keys. You know, it's been really challenging times for those working in the educational sphere. Now add on top of that, being involved in being representational of the students that you teach. There's a Kansas City nonprofit that's making tremendous strides in trying to level the playing field. That's Latinx Education Collaborative. And we're joined by Edgar Palacios, founder, president, and CEO. Hi, Edgar.
Hi, Ruth. How are you doing today?
We're doing great. And we have a special guest, and that is Yvonne Medrano, who is your Educator of the Year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yvonne is our esteemed 2020 Latinx Educator of the Year, and we are so proud to have her as part of our community.
Very exciting.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
That's a pretty cool honor, and we'll get into that and what that means and how you've engaged. Edgar, I want you to bring us up to speed. For folks who may not be familiar with what you all are doing, what is the mission and the goals for Latinx?
Yeah, and by the way, I appreciate the opportunity to be here to share a little bit more about our work. So Latinx Education Collaborative, or the LEC, as I affectionately call it, we work on increasing the representation of Latinx education professionals in K-12. We do this in three different ways. The first being retention. Latino teachers tend to leave the profession at higher rates than other members of the community. And so we want to make sure that we are creating a community that can sustain and retain and allow Latinx educators to thrive. Secondly, we talk a lot about pathway exposure. We want to talk to students, middle school students, high school students about becoming teachers one day. I believe that education is such a phenomenal choice. And it's one of the most important career fields out there, and that we need to be encouraging our young folks to consider it as an option. And thirdly, we do recruitment support. We are not interested in building a new pipeline. We're not interested in doing new things in terms of creating our own way of recruiting Latinx educators. But what we are interested in is working with existing options and opportunities to become teachers. For example, schools of education, alternative certification pathways, that we can help support them in recruiting and attracting Latinx candidates to their organizations, as well as also helping our community make the best decisions according to fit and what their needs are. So those are the three ways that we do the work. We are a proud nonprofit startup. We've been around officially. We got our C3 designation in 2018, November of 2018. So we are going into our third year of operations, and it's been quite a ride, considering COVID-19 happened right in the middle of it. So,
well, kudos to you for being able to stick it out through that. And we'll talk a little bit about how you've had to pivot. Can you share with us statistically, give us some numbers? What are we talking about? Yvonne is part of that proud group of Latinx educators, but what does it really look like?
Well, the numbers are a little, they're incredibly concerning here in the Kansas City metro area. So we actually just released a report called Landscape Analysis, Teachers of Color in Kansas City, where we focused our numbers. We wanted to see what the real numbers are. Nationally, 8% of educators identify as Latinx, and 25% of students K-12 identify as Latinx. So a huge disparity in just a teacher representation gap. But local, we finally have local data on this. 1% of all educators in the Kansas City metro area identify as Latinx. And that number can look as low as 3 teachers in the Johnson County area. And by the way, we define teachers as teachers. So in Kansas, you define a teacher as elementary, middle school, or secondary. And then everyone else is categorized under specialist or supports. And so the number that we were really astounded to see was 3 teachers in the Johnson County area. As we all know, Johnson County has an increasing Latinx population in general. And so we clearly have some work to do to make sure that our community is well reflected and represented in schools and buildings across our community.
I guess I'm surprised, but not in Johnson County. Let's roll back even further. Why is it important to have teachers who identify as Latinx in the classroom? You know, people would say, hey, a teacher is a teacher.
And I agree. I am the product of phenomenal white teachers out there, teachers of all different races and beliefs and whatnot. And that's not necessarily the issue. The issue is that when our students see themselves reflected in the teachers that serve them, they actually have better educational outcomes. There's a lot of work around cultural responsibility, cultural responsiveness, the idea that there are conversations that I'm going to more easily have with folks like me, or that have the same kind of cultural upbringing, or same language, same kind of cultural. I'm struggling with the word, but Yvonne could probably talk a little bit about it.
Just things outside of school, what they're eating for lunch, what they had for dinner, their cultural dress, or traditions that are going on outside of school, to have that relationship or that connection with an educator in the classroom, who that student might say, you know what, this teacher gets me. And you can have those conversations and build that relationship is really empowering for students to see someone that looks like them, talks like them, eats like them, dresses like them, listens to the same music. Just having that relationship is very powerful within the classroom, and them wanting to just work a little bit more for that person. Like, okay, I this person gets me. And so it's really powerful for them to see, for students to see someone who looks like them in leadership roles, whether it's in the classroom or in their community or in our country right now. That's powerful. It's like, if they can do it, I can do it too. And you share that story.
I appreciate that. I was going to share a little bit more, Ruth, just kind of as a follow-up to that. I was born in Miami, Florida, and Miami, being Latino, is fantastic. We're surrounded by all of the different nationalities, communities represented within the Latinx diaspora. We got the food, we got the language, we got the music, we got the flavor, the culture. It's all in Miami. It's readily available. It's easily accessible. It's not weird to walk into a classroom and speak Spanish. Nobody questions it. It is what it is. And then in 6th grade, my family moved to Spokane, Washington. And Spokane, Washington does not have the same Latino community that Miami does. And so for me, it was a very shocking experience. It was the first time that I recognized that Latinos were not in the majority of this country. There was also a lot of conversations that I had to learn immediately because of just the different cultural upbringings and the culture in general in Spokane. So I think about that experience for a lot of our students. Our community is growing. I think 17 or 18% of the national population today identifies as Latinx. As I mentioned earlier today, or earlier in the session, like 1 out of 4 students in the country is Latino. And so imagine growing up in a world where you don't see yourself reflected. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the overall point of this organization. We want to create a world where not just Latinx students, but all students see a thriving community of Latinx education professionals, because I think that's really important these days.
Yeah, and I can relate to that too, Edgar. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and being in a melting pot of just beautiful cultures and people. I was so lucky to have that. And we moved to this area about 10 years ago. And as I've shared with Edgar before, I didn't realize how underrepresented Latinx community was out here until I got into the workforce and then put our children into school. And so that's when I decided, what can I do as an educator, as a mom, as a community member, to speak up, to step out and really represent our community and all people of color. So not only our Latinx students see, someone of color in leadership roles or doing things for the community, but even our white students, that's important. When they leave this area, they're going to go and thrive in other places, and they need to know and understand how to work with others who don't necessarily look like them or come from the same cultural background as them.
Now you're teaching in the Lee's Summit area, is that correct? Well, you're teaching virtually right now.
Yes,
but
yes.
but through the Lee's Summit School District. So what does that look like, being a Latinx educator and the population you're teaching? What have you found? What have you discovered?
So I've discovered that there are very few Latinx educators within the Lee's Summit School District, but that this community of Latinx students is obviously growing and it's changing. And so it's important for us who do identify as Latinx to speak up and represent our community and have that place at the table to help to make the decisions that are important for our community, whether it's a student who's in the English language program, or it's just a student who's within a school. I think that's important for us to step up and also to connect with each other. Edgar has helped myself and some others form an affinity group within our district. That's been very helpful and very powerful, encouraging for us as educators to do the work that needs to be done. It's hard some days when you don't feel you have that person, even as an adult. So I know how I feel as an adult to not have that representation, but I could only imagine how hard it is for our students. And so that's why we come together and we connect. But it has been difficult to show that this, it's not just a black and a white thing here in regards to race. There's our Asian community and there's our Latinx community that we need to be mindful of.
And I will say to that, Yvonne is definitely representative of a lot of stories that I hear day in and day out with Latinx educators, not just locally, but across the country, right? It's interesting to me sometimes. We have community members that are joining us. This virtual space has been a phenomenal way of connecting with people. It's not great for the in-person and the warm hugs and some of that, but it's also great to connect with people from outside of our community who are struggling to find these types of resources that our organization provides. So I like to point out there is a strong community out in East Moline, Illinois. I guess they call it the Quad Cities up there. I'm not too sure. They don't have access to an organization like ours that's supporting them, that's talking to them about how to best navigate the educational systems, about how best to show up in these spaces. And so it's been a lot of fun to see our community galvanize and find pride in their identity, but also remain committed to making sure that every student that we serve understands who they are and understands the value of what they bring to the table.
Well, we love the idea that there's positives out of a pandemic and virtually we've been locked down for over a year. Expand on that, how you've been able to do that. I mean, I think that's such a cool thing to be able to reach out to a community that is, some distance physically, yet you're being able to reach out to those educators and give them a voice, a place to feel comfortable to talk.
Yeah, I think that's the real beauty of how we adapted our offerings, right? Being able to say, hey, we're going to commit to buying our Zoom account. We're going to commit to doing a little bit more virtual events. We're going to commit to building that infrastructure out. Because the reality is, one, it's slightly more cost effective. Two, I don't have to drive back and forth to coffee meetings anymore. And I absolutely love that. Three, a Zoom link can connect you to the rest of the world. And to me, that is such a powerful tool. In fact, one of my favorite stories in the middle of the beginning of the pandemic, I got a young man from Argentina, from Buenos Aires, Argentina, reached out, was interested in the work that we do and wanted to figure out a way to partner with students in his country. He thought that it was so cool. He wanted to offer services to students that we might work with. And so a relationship was built and formed out of that. And so do I miss hugging people? Absolutely. Do I miss being in community with my folks and going to the festivities that we throw and being able to gather that way? Yes. But for me, and I think for a lot of our educators, they have found a space that is safe for them to be who they are. They've found a space for them to be able to question and to learn, and to grow in their own identity, but also as educators as well. And so one thing that I absolutely love doing is building community. That's something that that drives me and drives the work long term. And so Zoom is a great tool for that. Now, we also have to be conscious that, there are things such as Zoom fatigue, right? And there are things that people don't want to be on camera all day. So the more that we're thinking about being equitable, and how people show up, and that we have different expectations for our community as well. If you are not having a good day, but you still want to be in the space and you don't want to be on camera because maybe your hair doesn't look as great as it could, or maybe you're not wearing the type of shirt that you want, turn off your camera. There's no rules there, right? We're gonna go ahead and have a conversation, and you're gonna have a great time in that moment. A great example of that was also Evolucion. We had our annual conference last October. We had roughly 300 people in attendance live for a 3-hour event. We had over 500 registered attendees, and people replayed the content. And so that was something that we were never ever able to do, right? Conferences, you go in person, you want to share that content with other people, but sometimes it's not recorded or people don't send out the presentations. We were actually able to say, hey, you missed it. Here's the link. Enjoy it. Ask us questions. Engage with us. And so it's been a really powerful tool for us in that way. That's kind of how we pivoted.
We're going to take a quick break. Oh, go ahead. Finish your thought, Yvonne. Then we'll take a quick break.
Okay, I was just going to say, I think with LEC, they've just made themselves accessible to educators and to students. And that has been a blessing, to know that if you need something and you have a question or you need a resource, that LEC has been open and accessible to us. So that has been a really great thing as an educator.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to dive deeper into all the things LEC is doing. Welcome back. We're talking with Edgar Palacios and Yvonne Medrana with Latinx Education Collaborative. You have made yourself so flexible, and that's fantastic. I want to go back, Edgar, and talk about your beginnings. It wasn't that long ago, but how did you do that?
I don't know.
And we
How
have,
or why?
Well, both. I think both. And that's interesting and of benefit to other nonprofits and people who are supporters of nonprofits to hear the story and how you moved it forward and then continue to move it forward in this pandemic.
It is a complex and complicated question, and it's a complex and complicated answer. I'll start with the why first. Following in the works of Simon Sinek, I had a great opportunity to travel across the country, and I was often visiting different districts and schools where I saw the Latino student population there. They were there, and I saw myself in the students, right? The second I saw them in the classrooms eating lunch or whatever, or learning, I was like, that was me. And so it was an immediate personal connection to that work. But then what I didn't see were teachers that looked like me. I didn't see a lot of educators that were Latino that either spoke Spanish or understood. I also entered some classrooms along the way where I was like, that was a questionable statement. There's a lot to unpack there. And so I've been in the nonprofit world. For the majority of my career, I tend to fundraise. And so I tend to shake hands and kiss babies and get rejected and do the process all over again. And so for me, I was like, I want to find a nonprofit that already does this work. And so I looked. I don't believe in like recreating or reinventing things. I don't believe in duplicating efforts. So for me, I was like, I'm going to find an organization that is aligned to this, and I'm going to either volunteer or maybe try to get hired or serve on the board, or at least donate, right? Unfortunately, in the Kansas City area, an organization dedicated to this issue does not exist. And at one point, I just felt complicit. I was like, well, I know I can do something about this. I know that it needs to be done. What's my responsibility here? And does this align with my passion? And can I make it work? The why. The how is even, it's incredibly difficult to do a nonprofit startup. There are a lot of resources and that I had access to. First and foremost, my partner Laura. When I told her about this idea, she said, "Well, we're going to make it work. We're going to figure out the budget, and we're going to make it work." And to be fair, she was she was my first funder, right? She was my first investor. I had to make some serious decisions around salary and all these other things that I would forego in order to get this project off the ground. So that was one thing. I think too, building community buy-in. I think that's something that we have to do every day. It just doesn't, there's not one point where we're gonna arrive and say we have everybody on board, because the organization shifts and it grows. And the way that we try to achieve our mission may shift and grow as well. And so it's keeping people appraised of what's going on, or apprised, I should say, of what's going on. That's a whole effort in itself. I loved working for nonprofits when I didn't have to come up with the theory of change or the logic models or the mission statement or the vision or the financial plan or I really was great with just going into different funders and just hey, I represent this mission right here. Here's our outcomes. Here's our goals. Let's call it a day. This is significantly more effort, more work. But it's worth it. It's worth it because we get to love on folks like Yvonne every day. We get to make sure that they feel special, and sometimes they don't. The number one reason that Latinx educators leave the profession is that they feel isolated within their own buildings. And if you're a first or second year Latinx educator and you have a bad experience, you just don't go and find a different job in a different school. That is not the natural outcome of that. You actually leave the profession altogether. And so for us, in order to do this work and to do it well, we want to make sure that our community knows that we are here and we got their back, and that we're going to be supportive of them throughout this process of becoming a professional educator.
Tell us how and why you chose Yvonne as your Educator of the Year. We're going to give some kudos here.
Absolutely. So, we had a formal nomination process. So we had a little over maybe 15 Educator of the Year candidates, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But Yvonne stood out. I think for the committee that chose Yvonne, some of the things that I heard were, first and foremost, she received a lot of nominations. So she has a lot of support within her community itself. So she was well respected. She's consistently fighting for equity. She's constantly making hard decisions and taking stands, which can be very difficult for our community of educators to do. And then she absolutely loves the children that she works with, right? The students that she works with. There is no question about her commitment. And so for someone like Yvonne, I also knew firsthand that she doesn't receive a lot of praise or recognition. I think that that's part of the issue. And that's a similar issue for most of our community. So for Yvonne, she's a phenomenal educator. And I think the committee that made that decision understood that, saw that in the words, saw that in her actions. And she's proven us right every day. She was the right choice for that award.
Well, Yvonne, again, congratulations. How was it that you got to LEC? How did you make that connection?
Well, I was selected as a teacher ambassador for our district. And so I went through that program and then made a connection through LEC, through the Kauffman Center and that. And so I was told about an event and I thought, I'm going to go. I don't know anyone there. No one in my Lee Summit community knew of LEC or that I knew of, because I felt really isolated, and I knew that I needed something more than what I was doing with reading and speaking up at different meetings and things like that. I needed more support from myself to stay in this profession and continue to do the work. And so I had to put myself out there and go to an event where I knew no one or nothing about the organization. And I felt at home, instantly felt at home, welcomed. And I was like, okay, I found my people. So, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. I just started volunteering for things and signing up to go to certain events and reaching out to Edgar for support and Susanna as well. And Laura was amazing in helping to support that and really make that connection. So that's how I found them. And now they're stuck with me.
Well, you're a
No, I was going to say, Yvonne, thank you. You know, I think at the initiation of this idea, right? You think about it one day, and it's just there, and you never know what's going to happen with it, right? You just don't know. And so I'm also glad that you mentioned Susana. Susana Lizarras is our Chief Community Officer, and we would have not gotten through 2020 without her efforts and her work as well. And so I want to acknowledge that. And then we also just brought on a community project manager, Lexi Rios, who's going to help us hopefully continue to serve better and more effectively and more efficiently the community that we want to serve. But Yvonne, you know, just hearing Yvonne speak takes me back to the idea itself. Into that unknown, like, is this even a good idea? And so I'm just grateful for Yvonne sharing that, and you're stuck with us, unfortunately, as well.
I'd say you're both benefiting from each other. Edgar, talk a little bit. I know you have like 4 signature programs. If we can run through those really quickly, I think it'd be great for our viewers to know what you're doing.
Yeah, you know, I think as part of our signature programs, that's I still struggle with like detailing what those are. First and foremost, we do have Evolucion, our annual conference, and so we typically do that in early November, late October. And so it's a gathering of our community. We talk about different issues that are important to Latinx educators, and Latinx educators actually create the conference. So there's a committee of folks who get involved and do that work. So that's one. We have a program called the Pipeline, where we do a design thinking experience for 6th graders at the moment, and we're looking at expanding that. But we talk about becoming teachers, and so through that fun process of design thinking, we talk to them about, like, can you imagine yourself doing this at a school? Can you imagine yourself becoming a principal one day? If you had a classroom, what would this idea look like? And so, you know, thinking about giving them the tools to then think about themselves in these spaces is so important. We're actually going to launch something that I'm really excited about. I'm a big fan of Clifton Strengths, and it's a tool that has really impacted my life and my professional growth. And so we're working on becoming a certified Clifton Strengths kind of coaching organization as well. And so we're going to be offering that to our educators to make sure that they are aware of their strengths, that they know how to utilize their strengths to achieve their desired outcomes, and that they feel supported and have tools to do that work long term. And then finally, I know Susana's working on a special project called Passion Pairings, where we're going to be able to connect seasoned Latinx educators with incoming folks, and making sure that they are well connected and well supported in those ways. So those are 4 things that we're currently doing and working on, as well as like all the social media and, you know, all the online live streaming and whatnot that comes along with that.
Yvonne, tell us a little bit about these pairings.
Super excited about them to just be a part of all of that. So, and I'm in on it as much as I can with the social media, you know, making the effort to join in on that, and then really excited about connecting with our young teachers or new teachers into the field, and supporting them and sponsoring them, not just, you know, for a phone call or for a quick Zoom, but really being there and showing up for them, I think is important. And I think LEC has really set that example for educators who are currently working with them to continue to do that work with others, really being there and showing up for them and supporting them in the work. And so I am so excited to be a part of this group of folks that have just embraced me as an educator, have empowered me and encouraged me and inspired me to keep going.
Well, I'd be remiss if we didn't let our audience know you can find out everything exciting that's going on with LEC at latinxedco.org. And you guys are everywhere with social media. So Edgar, are you staying up till 3 in the morning when the baby is up, and you know, are your thumbs like, you know, having fatigue?
You know, so Isabel, my new daughter, she's an honorary employee of the LEC, and so She's gone through several roles in the last 2 months. She's currently our chief communications officer. She's only 2.5 months, and so she doesn't have all the skill sets yet. Run a performance improvement plan with her for that. But she's trying, and I'm actually engaging her in the conversations about becoming a teacher herself one day. And so I think that might be the right pathway for her during this work. And so I'm actually glad that she has access to folks like Yvonne and Susana and a lot of other folks who hopefully will inspire her journey along the way. Because to be fair, Isabel really centers the work. I want her to grow up in a world where she has access to people who look like her, who understand her cultural upbringing, who understand her and her power that she brings as a Latina. And so that's the kind of world that I want to build. She crystallizes that for me every day. And so the 3 o'clocks are worth it. Although I will say, I don't know what she's doing up cooing like at 3 o'clock after she eats. Like, what are we doing here? But
she's thinking hard about being an educator already at 2.5 months. You've ingrained her. I'm so impressed that indoctrination.
That professional development plan is already.
It's already there.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Well, again, Yvonne, congratulations to you as being the Educator of the Year. And Edgar, it's been so great to follow the journey of LEC and shifting that paradigm. Continued good luck, success, and keeping us posted on all that you're doing. We want to thank you for listening to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice, and we're produced by Charitable Communications, and we're proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. If you'd like to be a guest on KC Cares or underwriting opportunities, please visit our website, kccaresonline.org, and you can spread the love, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio, and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. And catch us on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Thanks for joining us on KC Cares.